Hey, welcome back to the pod. I hope whoever's listening to this, you're doing really, really well. We are trying out our third microphone yet today because I wasn't quite sure that I liked the sound quality on the one that I was using before in the end. But apart from that, we're going to jump straight into the meat of today's episode. Today, I want to talk about something that I think contributes hugely to my own happiness and specifically my sense of control over my own life. And that is the concept of extreme ownership. Adopting a belief in extreme ownership means that whatever happens in your life becomes your own fault and your own responsibility. So any success that you have is your own fault. Any screw-ups that you make are your own fault. Not your partners, not your co-workers, not your boss or your teachers, not your tiredness, not your busyness. It's all on your shoulders. The point of extreme ownership to me never has been and never will be about fairness or taking accountability. Even though personal accountability is something that I value really highly and it is really important to me, I don't think it's what's most important. The whole point of it to me is giving myself the best shot at success that I can, and success to me is a happy life. Adopting extreme ownership into your life will be a beautiful contributor to your happiness because, in my opinion, it is one of the most empowering mindset shifts that you can take on. When people live their lives by excuses, it makes me really sad. And it makes me really sad to think that I used to live that way. And it's not because they're not taking personal accountability for their actions and their outcomes, and that's unjust and unfair in some way. It's because I think living by excuses contributes to keeping us stuck and probably therefore unhappy. Taking a stance of extreme ownership is the opposite of adopting a victim mindset. And to put it really simply, feeling like the victim is going to bring you down consistently, whereas feeling like you're in control of your own life is only going to make you feel better. When you adopt an extreme ownership mindset, you are suddenly in control of your life in as close to its entirety as is possible. And of course, it goes without saying that there are always going to be so many things in this world that are out of our control. You know, we can't control other people, we can't control the global political shit show that is currently happening on a smaller and more light-hearted scale. We can't control the weather, we can't control bad traffic on our way to work or run errands, but what we can control is our thoughts, feelings, actions, and how we respond to everything that happens around us. I do want to preface this episode with something that I've wanted to talk about since I started this, since episode 1, but it hasn't felt appropriate or relevant specifically to anything that I've spoken about previously, whereas it does feel really relevant and important to acknowledge here. I never intend to or want to invalidate or neglect to acknowledge that there is so much inequality in the world, and in some ways we're all dealt a hand when we're born in terms of what sex we're born with, or sexuality we are, our skin colour, how much money we're born into, what our social status is, what area of the world we're born into, you know, whether we're fully physically and mentally able or not. I also recognise that I have a huge amount of privilege in that I'm white, I was born into a middle class family, I've never seriously had to worry about where my next meal's coming from, I'm fully physically able and I'm neurotypical as far as I'm aware, I could afford to go to university and get a degree, and my parents could afford expensive musical education for me as a kid. When I was first starting to put this podcast together, one of my biggest fears was that essentially because I was so rife with privilege, like I didn't really have a right to talk about my worldviews or give anything close to resembling advice on the internet. And then I decided that that was a stupid excuse to stop myself from doing this. I know that whilst I've experienced certainly multiple extreme statuses of mental health, and I've been through some adversities that I don't know if I'll ever speak about on the internet, there are just so many life experiences that I have never had and I'm never gonna have because of the hand that I was dealt. Which means that for so many people I'm just not gonna be the right person to listen to, and I know that in fact probably the number of people who are gonna be able to listen to this and really benefit from what I have to say is gonna be like a teeny tiny fraction of the population. But everything that I say on here would have been relevant to little Anya at some point, and a lot of it is still relevant to me now, and if it was relevant to her and is now to me, then it's going to be relevant to somebody else out there too. So everything I'm doing with this podcast is with her and myself and people like her and me in mind, and like I've said before, if it's useful to one person then it is 100% worth me putting it out there. So if you don't want to listen to a relatively rich white bitch talk about extreme ownership and taking responsibility for your own life, then this is your chance to jump off a train and get out of here before I start running my mouth. But if you do decide to keep on listening, me and you both are leaving our excuses at the door for the remainder of this episode. And if you're still here, you get to listen to me potentially cancel myself at 28 subscribers as a reward. Because the first thing I want to talk about is Molly-Mae and that infamous Diary of a CEO podcast interview. Take yourself back to 2021. Love Island internet darling Molly-Mae Hague goes on the Diary of a CEO podcast and does one of her only ever existing interviews, I think, and says that essentially we all have the same 24 hours in a day as Beyonce, and you get one life and it's up to you what you do with it. And the internet goes absolutely fucking feral. Now, I completely understand where some of the backlash came from, specifically regarding the fact that Pretty Little Thing, which I think she was creative director of at the time, had been accused of severely underpaying their garment workers. But I was also a participant in lots of conversations with peers and friends about it where that didn't even get mentioned, and all that was spoken about was, yeah, but she can't say that because she comes from a middle class family and she went on reality TV and got lucky and she's got pretty privilege and we can't all be millionaires. Quite obviously, there is an astronomical amount of inequality in this world, but I've spoken about this before and I'll probably talk about it many times in the future. But when somebody gives us an opinion about something, we're always going to get it with holes in it, and it is within your power to decide what meaning you then project into those holes, or whether you project any meaning into them at all or not. I personally did not interpret what she said to mean that she thinks that we're all born equal into society and we all have equal opportunities in life. But I think from the conversations that I have with other people about it and a lot of what I saw online, I think a lot of people did project that meaning into those holes. I don't know if that's what she meant, and nobody else can either unless they've had a personal conversation with her, because we can't get inside people's heads. But I suspect it's not, because I think you'd have to be pretty fucking stupid to wholeheartedly believe that we are all equal in society, and Molly-Mae Hague is clearly not a completely stupid woman. I know that the world is completely rife with inequality, and it is going to be so much harder for somebody in a worse position than me to be able to truly believe that the world is their oyster, and if they put enough hard work in, they can achieve whatever they want, because I don't think that is true for absolutely everybody. But I do think if you are not one of those extreme cases where actually the circumstances that you've been dealt by life just mean that some things are always going to be completely impossible for you, it doesn't do to dwell on and fixate on the fact that certain things are going to be harder for you than for other people. And things being more difficult for you does not mean they are therefore impossible for you. You know, once you've validated your own personal experiences and feelings, nothing's going to be achieved from fixating on and ruminating over that fact, like again and again. If all you're ever searching for is validation from other people that your life is hard, and permission from them to stay stagnant in your current lifestyle and emotional state because of it, then you're not going to be able to take any action to change it, and you're not going to be able to create a happy life for yourself. Obviously, extreme ownership is something that's going to be much more relevant to somebody in a similar life circumstance to me than it is to somebody, say, currently living in a war zone. But I think the problems come in when people who aren't living in those extreme scenarios start telling themselves lies about the limitations that their circumstances put on them. And they then make it mean that if something is made harder for them by a life circumstance that they have, they can't do anything about it, it's not their fault, and if anybody dares say otherwise, it's not fair. I genuinely believe that there are so many people in the world who are capable of so much more than they let themselves realise, but that is something that can be changed, and if there is any small part of you that feels like this could apply to you, then I think it can be a really rewarding perspective shift to start to explore. If we start by talking about one of the most prevalent excuses I think that people give when it comes to talking about positive life changes, which is that I don't have the time to do it. And I think what people actually mean a lot of the time when they say this is not that they don't have the time, it's that they don't feel able to make the time, or they're not willing to sacrifice some of how they're spending it. Also, at the end of the day, it is your choice how you spend your time, regardless of how tired or stressed you are. So say you do an extensively long day's work at school or uni or at your job, and you use that as an excuse to come home and flop on the sofa and watch TV instead of starting running to get fit, or starting working on that creative side project that you've been interested in doing to bring you joy and fulfillment and potentially an extra stream of income. Like, that is absolutely fine to do that, and doing things to recharge and bring us comfort and to revitalise us are also super important things. But on that day, you have made the choice to prioritise your comfort over the other big, super taxing thing. Again, there's no shame, that's completely okay, but don't kid yourself that it is out of your control because you're tired or because you're stressed. You can't then work on those things. You can work on those things and start them regardless of your emotional state. So yes, if you're doing a degree or you're doing a job that you find especially taxing, making big lifestyle changes, or any lifestyle changes at all, or starting something new is potentially going to be extremely difficult. But things that are worth it often are, and I do think we all often in life have to go through sprint periods where one thing has to take precedent over everything else, and I don't think it's necessarily realistic for everybody to be able to be maxing all of their needs bars like consistently all of the time. Sometimes something does just have to take priority. You know, I do think sprint periods where one particular thing takes precedent for a while at a reasonable expense to your other things is often necessary to make big changes in our lives. But it's your choice whether you choose to take on that sprint period in pursuit of the end goal that you want or not. And to an extent, I think acceptance is a huge component in this. Like, if you want to work a hard job and have a healthy lifestyle where you're cooking yourselves meals every day and working out consistently, that is going to be hard. You're going to have to make sacrifices, and you're going to have to do things that you don't feel like doing when you're tired and stressed. But uncomfortable doesn't equal impossible. And yeah, some people are going to have huge head starts and advantages over others. Like, if you take Kendall and Kylie Jenner, they've probably spent their whole lives with access to personal chefs and personal trainers, and if anything they want, realistically, they're going to be able to afford. So they're going to have to deprioritize things so much less than your average person. Like, it's going to be much easier for them to cook a healthy meal or do a workout after a day's work because the friction between them and those activities is so much less. Like, there are fewer boundaries for them. But I do think, unless it's for the sake of actively trying to level the playing field, there is nothing to be gained from focusing on and putting all your attention on what other people have working for them and what you don't. If anything, it's going to put you at a disadvantage. Taking your focus away from that and putting it back onto what is within your control is going to allow you to do absolutely everything that you can with what you've got. Following on from this, I think one of the biggest problems with excuses is that your brain does not like internal conflict. So whatever beliefs you are feeding it, it will continue to endeavour to prove right. Additionally, your brain will focus on what you tell it is important with focus and attention and repetition. So if you are constantly internally focused on and thinking and talking about what is out of your control and what limiting life circumstances you have and how unrealistic it is that you'll ever achieve your dream, your brain will then actively seek out and latch onto things that it sees as evidence that that is true, and then you will start to see more evidence which will reinforce this belief within yourself and continue this negative cycle. Also, the less you believe that something is possible for you, the less likely you are to continue to take action towards it, and you'll also just start to experience lack of hope and feeling less in control, all of which is just going to bring you down. You know, if you're always focused on the things that are working against you, you are going to feel more and more out of control of your own life. Whereas if you focus on all the freedom and opportunities that you do have, your brain is going to seek to see more of them, and you will become much better personally at spotting opportunities to take action, which is ultimately going to lead to more success and happiness for you. Adopting an extreme ownership mindset means booting excuses straight out of your life because they're all lies and they're not valid reasons to not pursue what you truly want and what you know is going to be good for you. And if you want to experience firsthand how powerful this mindset shift can be, then I've got homework for you. Take a day or a couple of days or a week or however long you want to try this for, and practice replacing your excuses. So whenever you find yourself saying to yourself or going to say to somebody else that I can't do this because of XYZ, or I haven't, or I'm not doing this because of whatever reason, replace the reason, the excuse, with saying it's not a priority to me right now. There is so much power in this statement, because if you are able to honestly identify what you are prioritizing right now through your actions, not just what you want to be prioritizing and what you think and say your values are, what you are actively prioritizing currently in your life, you're then empowered to ask yourself whether you are happy with your priorities and whether they align with your values and goals. And it's only once you've taken a good hard look at that and identified it that you can take action towards changing it if necessary and if you want to. And it is okay to deprioritize some things sometimes. Like, it doesn't mean that they're not important to you at all anymore. It just means that at this moment in time, other things are more important and have to take precedent. Something else that I think links into this topic is that at some point I think there's a hard pill that we will have to swallow, which is that there aren't any magical life hacks that I'm aware of that we can use to face the hard choices and actions that we have to take head on to make any of these changes that I'm talking about. Because if there were, then everybody would have used them and nobody would be left struggling with any of these things. I think you do have to get to a point where you can accept that some of it is just going to be really fucking difficult. And one of the things that I do absolutely hate when I see it online is, well, no, I don't hate it. I don't like it when people say things like, you just have to pull your boots up and do it, like, you just have to give yourself a kick at the arse, just do it. Just do a hard thing. Like, I don't like that when it doesn't come with implementable action steps as to how to start doing it, or when people don't share how they've done it. I don't like it. I hate it when it's then paired with shaming and blaming and criticising people and calling them names like lazy. All of which I spoke about in my first 2 episodes, and is partly why I started the podcast in the first place, was because I wanted to talk about the tools that I have found and how I've been actually able to create significant and sustained lifestyle change for myself. What I want to say is, while yes, certainly there are tools that can make doing the hard thing easier, and I think spreading knowledge about them is so important, but even with all the tools in the world to make it easier for you, there is a certain element to all of this of you do have to be able to push yourself to do the hard things and accept and be able to say to yourself that maybe this is just what hard feels like. You know, maybe pushing through this feeling is just what it's going to take. And I've spoken about this before, but you have to choose your hard. Nobody gets an easy life. You have to choose which kind of hard life you want for yourself and which one is going to be most bearable for you. When people say things like, when it feels the hardest, that's when it's the most important to keep going, I think this is what they're getting at, because that's the point when you discover for yourself whether you can actually accept how hard something is going to be or not and push through it anyway. And once you've developed the ability to do that, you're onto a winner. I don't think it matters whether you've failed at that point hundreds or thousands of times before. I think once you've managed to push yourself through that hardship once, you have proven to yourself that you can then replicate that and do it again and again and again. You know, all it takes is that one success for you to prove to yourself and other people that you can do hard things. I do also think that extreme ownership can be even more beneficial if you have been dealt a really shit hand in life, because it makes how you approach the potentially more limited things that you have control over even more crucial. And what I will say is, having gone temporarily literally insane at the ripe age of 19 and having seriously struggled with mental health issues since I was a teenager, I could have easily said to myself and to other people that it wasn't realistic for me to think that I would ever have this life where I am so happy, I have so much consistent mental and physical energy. I'm able to wake up at 5 a.m. every day and exercise. I'm able to work on this podcast and put an episode out weekly at the same time as having a regular day job. I could have said it was unrealistic to think that I'd ever be able to finish my degree, and I could have told myself that, well, I'm just not going to be able to do what all these other people do because I've got all this stacked against me. If I'd wanted to, I could have had every quote-unquote excuse in the book to tell myself that that life wasn't going to be possible for me and that wasn't going to be my experience. I could have listened to somebody like Molly-Mae talking about us all having the same 24 hours in a day, and I could have got arsey and said, yeah, but I've suffered from clinical depression and I went through XYZ life experience, and XYZ is therefore so much harder for me than other people, so actually you can't say that. And all of those are facts about my life experience, and they are all true and valid, but it is my choice whether I choose to fixate on them and fixate on the things that have happened to me and be bitter and vicious towards anybody who suggests that I have any sort of autonomy. Or I can say, yeah, I've been through some serious struggles, and when I was a child and a teenager, I had much more limited autonomy and limited skills to be able to do anything about it with. But my God, am I going to do everything that is within my power to change that for myself now and make sure that I never go back to that place again. I wouldn't have gotten to the place I'm in now if I hadn't trained myself to believe that I didn't have to keep repeating this narrative to myself about what my life was going to be like and what my limitations were. And yeah, it was fucking hard work, but like I've said before, there is no such thing as an easy life. You have to choose your hard. My intention with this really isn't to invalidate anybody's pain or suffering, because your pain truly is so valid. I think, as much as I absolutely love my life now and I'm so happy in it, I do still think that this world is pretty brutal for us all to live in one way or another, at two varying degrees. And we all experience pain because of it. It's a part of the human experience. And whilst none of us are ever going to be able to fully understand other people's unique experiences, I do think I understand pain, and I understand what it feels like to have your life truly consumed by it. And if you can relate to that to any degree, then I am so sorry. But please believe me when I say that I think there is definitely something that you can do about it, like no matter how small. Even if all you can do right now is take some minuscule first steps, or just one teeny tiny first step, I think that is still worth something. I think unless you can honestly say to yourself that you've exhausted every possible option to make this thing happen for you, whether it's starting your health and fitness journey, or trying to improve your mental health, or just starting a project that you've been too scared to, any excuse you're giving yourself as to why it's not happening is a lie that you're telling yourself. The excuse is not why it's not happening, you are why it's not happening. Because you are choosing actively not to do everything in your power to make it happen. And this is where priorities come back in. I've been thinking about this week in regards to myself as well, because I'm having my last therapy session for the time being next week. I've been working with my current therapist for over a year now, and essentially because I'm not a student anymore, I need to start paying a full fee, and I would be able to afford it, but I wouldn't be able to afford much else. Like, I'd be able to pay my rent and my bills and for the weekly food shop, but things like my gym membership would have to go. I wouldn't be able to afford to keep buying new books, like I wouldn't be able to get things like takeout coffees. Like, it would essentially take up all my remaining like free budget. And it's not that therapy is not important to me anymore, or not something that I value massively, because I think it's incredibly important and I would still benefit immensely from it. But I have made the decision to get a minimum wage part-time job coming out of uni, because I wanted to prioritise having a complete mental break and experiencing a somewhat normal, like less intense lifestyle than I have done since I've been training for like this musical education. Like, I have an undergrad degree, there are so many undergrad jobs that I could apply for, and I could launch myself straight into a freelance musician's career, and I could try teaching. There are so many things that I could be doing to bring in more money, but I'm making the choice not to. So I cannot say with my chest that I cannot afford therapy anymore and that making more money is something that is out of my control, because it's not. It's fully within my control. I'm just choosing not to prioritise it right now, and that's okay. So I refuse to say to myself or to anybody else that, oh, I can't keep going to therapy because I can't afford it anymore. I'm saying to myself that I'm not going to therapy anymore because it's not a priority to me right now, because I'm not choosing to actively do anything to make more money to be able to afford it. Framing it like that is so much more empowering to me and makes me feel a lot better about it than I would do if I was saying to myself, well, I can't afford it anymore and that's out of my control. Also, this way I'm saying to myself, I know the time will come when I do want to prioritise actively creating a successful career for myself and making more money, and when that happens, I won't have to deprioritise spending money on therapy. But I also recognise that not everything can fall into place in your life at the same time, and this is just one of those things currently. In fact, I'm actively choosing for it to be one of those things, and I think I'm so much happier for thinking that than I would be if I was thinking that this is out of my control, it's not my choice and I can't afford it. Which isn't true, I'd be lying to myself. The really useful thing about adopting this mindset is that when you start viewing your life through this lens, your eyes are suddenly open to all the opportunities around you and all the actions you could be taking. Whereas when you're constantly thinking about what in your life isn't within your control and what has been predetermined for you, your eyes are completely shut off to all those opportunities, because you're telling your subconscious mind that your life is out of your control and there's nothing you can do about it. If you believe and tell yourself that there are opportunities everywhere for you to take more control over your own life, your brain will constantly be seeking to prove that right, and it will start to see those opportunities everywhere. Whereas if you tell yourself that you aren't in control of your life and so many things aren't possible for you, your brain will start looking for evidence that that is true. And you will then spend your whole life seeing things that are out of your control and feeling powerless. I started the book for 5am Club yesterday, which is hilarious that I've only just gotten around to it because I've been getting up at 5 for over a year, and it's one of the first books that Shelby Sacco recommends to read. So it's been on my to-read list for years. I don't know how I've only just got to it, but I did anyway. There's an extremely relevant quote to this on page 5. Limitation is nothing more than a mentality that too many good people practice daily until they believe it's reality. It breaks my heart to see so many potentially powerful human beings stuck in a story about why they can't be extraordinary, professionally and personally. You need to remember that your excuses are seducers, your fears are liars, and your doubts are thieves. I want to finish by saying if you are doing something, no matter how small, you are doing enough. If you are taking action towards changing something that you're not happy with, you're doing enough. If you are not happy with the state of your life in any specific area right now, but you are doing something tiny towards improving it, you are taking personal responsibility for it, and you no longer have to say to yourself, my life looks like XYZ and it's my own fault. You can now say to yourself, my life currently looks like this, but I am in the process of making it look like that, whatever you want that to be. Please, please, please give yourself the absolute gift of looking at the clear picture of where you do actually have control over your own life and your own decisions. You will feel better when you start viewing everything as within your control. It's not about fairness, it's not about holding people accountable for the states of their own lives. It's about empowering yourself and helping yourself become a happier person. Thank you so much if you've gotten to this point in the episode. I really hope that you were able to take something away from this, or that you feel empowered or inspired to think about this attitude a bit further. I love you so, so much. I hope you have an incredible rest of your day and an amazing week, and I will speak to you next time. Bye.